Hello, everybody. This is Ben, and I recently had a debate slash discussion with an atheist on YouTube. And at the very end of this discussion, the atheist said something which I thought was quite telling. It was very typical of what atheists advocate and talk about when it comes to religion and the future. So let's just start by looking at that image. This is an image of what the atheist said. I just took a screen capture, and of course I blanked out his name so that just to protect this person's privacy. So I was talking about the tremendous amount of good that Christianity has actually brought into the world. Now, I just want to draw a distinction between Christianity and religion, because although Christianity is a religion, I'm not necessarily an advocate for religion itself, but I am a Christian. I think Christianity is amazing as a faith, but I'm not promoting religion in general. I don't have a preference for whether someone's an atheist or a Muslim, for example. I don't think either one is particularly good. So this is what he said. Good human beings is what has brought all goodness into the world, and evil people has brought the evil. Like I said, there are good and bad in every group, and God plays no role in either. We are just at a crossroads of evolution now. At some point, religious dogma has to be thrown into the dustbin of history for mankind to move forward. I'm just saying at this particular moment in world history, the Christian faith and all the other world religions are holding humanity back. So this is very typical of what atheists espouse when it comes to the role of religion, this idea that the world is heading for a utopian, an amazing future utopia, that in order for that future utopia to happen, we have to get rid of all forms of organized religion. And, that these religions are keeping us in the past. Now, I disagree completely with this, and I want to explain and explore why. I'll try to keep it as concise as possible. So let's look at a few different links. So we'll start here. Now, if you're expecting the world to get more religious, if you're expecting the world to become less religious and, for that to lead to this utopian progressive society, you're going to be very disappointed, because research is showing that far from getting less religious, the world itself is getting more religious. Yes, the number of agnostics and others who don't affiliate with a certain religion shrinks as a percentage of the global population. That's what's going to happen in the future. So in 2010, 16% said they were unaffiliated with a religion, whereas by 2050, it's predicted if current demographic trends continue, just 13% of people in the world will be the same, which would be atheist, agnostic, or just no religion. So the United States, though, seems to be an exception to this. So if you're expecting, all major religions except Buddhism is expected to rise as the population does the same. Now, what I just want to point out is when they do these kind of things, often they don't look at the rate of conversion. Christianity tends to convert people at a much higher rate than Islam does. And we're also seeing millions of people in the Middle Eastern world currently walking away from Islam to become Christian. So that's happening as we speak, and that will continue on, and that should have a profound impact on the numbers. And, I do believe, this is saying here, Islam will grow faster than any other major religion and at a higher rate than the population balloons. Muslims are projected to increase by 73%, whereas Christianity will grow by 35% by 2050. Now, I reckon we're going to exceed Muslims. I do believe there will be more Christians than Muslims by 2050. Just because someone is born into a religion doesn't mean they will stay in that religion. So, and here's just another, I'll just briefly cover this. New research finds that humans, let me get rid of this, I'm sick of saying that. New research finds that humans have natural tendencies to believe in gods and an afterlife. And this was really good research. It involved nearly £2 million in research money, 57 researchers, over 47 studies in 20 countries. That's pretty extensive. And yeah, they came to the conclusion that, the studies conclude that humans are predisposed to believe in gods and an afterlife. So that's, I think that's pretty convincing. And what I'm trying to point out is human beings are naturally religious, naturally bend towards believing in God or gods and an afterlife. Now, let me just be fair here and say there is research that shows early societies, so we're talking ancient history here, were far more capable than many since of containing atheism within the spectrum of what they considered normal. So, in other words, in ancient Greece and ancient Rome, there's good evidence that there were atheists and that there's always been atheists throughout history. So yes, people tend towards religion, people tend towards belief in gods and the supernatural, but there's also always been a minority that are atheist. So let me just resize that window. Now, and just very briefly, more studies show children are wired for religious belief. The headline says it all. So we are just naturally religious, for the most part, with some variation. Now, here's something I think is really worth talking about. There's a book called Sapiens. It's a very popular book. It's a rock star book. I'm pretty sure it's on all the major bestseller lists. So it's, the subtitle is A Brief History of Humankind. And the guy who wrote it, which is Yuval Noah Harari, he is definitely an atheist and believes very strongly in evolution. So he talks about, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. This idea that we also have certain unalienable rights. And that's, okay, so that's from the Declaration of Independence. You probably have heard that before. I'd be surprised if you hadn't. Now, here's the thing. He deconstructs the idea based on his atheist beliefs that there are, in fact, objective human rights. So he says, according to the science of biology, people were not created. They have evolved, and they certainly did not evolve to be equal. The idea of equality is inextricably intertwined with the idea of creation. So bear that in mind. The Americans got the idea of equality from Christianity, which argues that every person has a divinely created soul and that all souls are equal before God. However, if we do not believe in the Christian myths, his term, about God, creation, and souls, what does it mean that all people are equal? Evolution is based on difference, not on equality. Every person carries a somewhat different genetic code and is exposed from birth to different environmental influences. This leads to the development of different qualities that carry with them different chances of survival. Created equal should therefore be translated into evolved differently. Interesting thought. Equally, there are no such thing as rights in biology. There are only organs, abilities, and characteristics. Birds fly not because they have a right to fly, but because they have wings. And it's not true that these organs, abilities, and characteristics are unalienable. Yep. So, he's basically, here we go. This is a really good quote. And what are the characteristics that evolved in humans? Life, certainly, but liberty? There is no such thing in biology. Just like equality, rights, and limited liability companies, liberty is something that people invented and that exists only in their imagination. Advocates of equality and human rights may be outraged by this line of reasoning. Yeah, well, obviously. So basically, he talks about it being an imagined order. That human rights are part of an imagined order that we've come to as a society. But he does come to some conclusions. This is really interesting. It's likely that more than a few readers squirmed in their chairs while reading the preceding paragraphs. If people realize that human rights exist only in the imagination, isn't there a danger that our society will collapse? Voltaire said about God that there is no God, but don't tell that to my servant, lest he murder me at night. Hammurabi would have said the same about his principle of hierarchy and Thomas Jefferson about human rights. Homo sapiens, humans, has no natural rights, just as spiders, hyenas, and chimpanzees have no natural rights. But don't tell that to our servants, lest they murder us at night. Now that's really interesting. He then says, such fears are well justified. So basically he's saying human rights are an imaginary thing. They don't exist. But thank goodness people do actually believe in God, and as a result of that do actually believe in human rights. But don't tell any of these ordinary people that God doesn't exist. Well, he is proclaiming that God doesn't exist, but he's hoping somehow that people will keep the idea of human rights, this quote-unquote imaginary order he's talking about, that people will keep that despite the fact they're losing the foundation on which that's based, which is the Christian faith. So you take out the Christian faith, reasonably, we should lose whatever's built on top of that, but he's kind of hoping we can keep the implications of the Christian faith without the foundation of it. Obviously, that's very misguided. He seems to think, and talks about it down here, that there's a privileged few who do actually understand all this, that do understand human rights are an illusion and that God doesn't exist. And evolution excludes the possibility of there being objective human rights. And basically, he's part of the elites, of course. He's part of the elite group of people who understand this. But everything's going to be okay because the little people, the average people, they're never going to catch on. Well, if there's a continued secularization of the Western world, if people continue walking away from Christianity, I'm sorry, but there really may be some big implications for human rights. Because, yeah, there's no foundation for them, as he's admitted. I think it's misguided and wrong for him to have faith, haha, no pun intended, but for him to have faith will keep what was built on Christianity without the foundation. So, another thing I like to point out is when it comes to good coming from Christianity, what I've noticed is atheists often have a very reductionist view of morality in the sense that they go, we kind of want everyone at least to be in the middle. As in, we don't want people to be murderers and rapists and robbers and so forth. But if people are just generally vaguely law-abiding and generally decent to each other, then that will be okay. But the world is changed by people that make extraordinary sacrifices and by people who go to a much greater extent to serve other people. That's what really changes the world. And a lot of what we take for granted came as a result of people making enormous sacrifices. And I would argue that if you look at that pinnacle of morality, almost universally it comes from people who are inspired by belief in the God of the Bible, by the Christian faith. Okay? And this is where an atheist is going to make my argument for me. He says, as an atheist, I truly believe Africa needs God. And I'll try to just hit the high points of this because this is getting kind of long. It confounds my ideological beliefs, stubbornly refuses to fit my worldview, and has embarrassed my growing belief that there is no God. Now here it is. Now a confirmed atheist, I've become convinced of the enormous contribution that Christian evangelism makes in Africa, sharply distinct from the work of secular NGOs, government projects, and international aid efforts. These alone will not do. Education and training alone will not do. In Africa, Christianity changes people's hearts. It brings a spiritual transformation. The rebirth is real. The change is good. Yes, now, I'll just summarize, but, you can go and find this and read this. It's definitely worth your time. So what he talks about is, it's not just the fact that Christians go over... See, he does admit that Christianity inspires people to go to Africa and to help people and to actually raise people out of poverty and help improve their physical situation. But it's not just that. It's not only that. What he really talks about as well is the fact that Christianity as a faith that changes people's worldview and changes their perception of reality and of how things work, changes their view of themselves and other people, it actually changes their hearts and therefore changes the way they act. And let me just go back to the article real quick because there's a really great quote in here. I just want to find it. Okay, whenever we entered a territory worked by missionaries, we had to acknowledge that something changed in the faces of the people we passed and spoke to, something in their eyes, the way they approach you direct, man to man, without looking down or away. They had not become more deferential towards strangers, in some ways less so, but more open. So he's noticed this change that's come about because of missionaries going in and preaching the Christian faith, introducing people to the risen Christ. So he's noticed this as an atheist. So his name is Matthew Paris. Now, here's one more interesting thing. Atheism is resulting in itself dying out. So this is a graph I found. Are you the parent guardian of children under 18? Are you the parent guardian of a child 18 or younger? So look at this. So this gives a line showing if you are of any of these religions, how likely are you to actually breed and have offspring? So the Protestants, which would be me, is here. It's kind of in the middle. The Mormons, they seem to have a lot of kids. And which line is this? Oh, the red one seems to be Hindus. But have a look at the blue line, the dotted blue line. It's right at the very bottom. So this shows and look at the difference between the blue line and the Mormon one, which is the darker blue line up the top. Have a look at the big difference, and also the difference between the lighter blue line and the Protestant one. That's quite a sizable difference. I mean, if you look at, say, age 35, you're pushing towards 60% likelihood of having kids at age 35 if you're Protestant, and if you're atheist, you're looking at under 30%. So that's quite sizable. The difference between nearly 60% and just over 30%, maybe 35%, if you're an atheist. That's a big difference. That gap is huge, and that actually shows why atheism is it's just going to die out, because more. Well, let me be fair though. Just because you're born into a religion doesn't mean you'll continue being religious. But also, if you're born into an atheist house, it doesn't mean you'll continue being atheist. But it does have a big impact. If you grow up a certain way, you're likely to stay that way unless something changes. So, I mean, that's the thing is, atheism just can't really sustain itself if it was simply based on birth rates. I remember seeing a statistic: atheism has a birth rate below 2 per couple, which means I think it's 1.6 per couple, which means over time, if it was simply down to birth rates, atheism would completely die out in time. But looking at like the blue line, Mormons are having heaps of kids. We're Muslims. Muslims are purple. Look at they're having heaps of kids. The Muslims, they're having more kids than the Protestants, but not by much. Not by much. And this is in America, so these are American Muslims and Christians. Yes, so I mean, I thought all of that was worth exploring and discussing, and yeah, I wanted to just use that as a way of explaining why I don't think at all religion is going to be consigned to the dustbin of history. I think that's quite ridiculous, actually. Yep, so thanks for joining me for this. I'll see you in the next video.